In my introductory lecture, I talked briefly about the demise of the Western Roman Empire. Today we will look, again, too briefly, at the kingdoms that replaced it. Basically, the Franks settled in what today is northern France and western Germany. The Visigoths settled in what today is Spain. The Ostrogoths and then the Lombards took over Italy, and the Saxons moved into northern Germany and England. In other words, this was a period of great migrations, and the art these groups produced, at least in their early days, is often lumped together under the term migratory art. So what kind of art can one produce when constantly on the move? Art that's highly portable or easily carried. Your reading referred to articles such as these as status symbols, small precious items that proclaimed their wearer's wealth and social status. Fibulae were used to fasten garments. Note the rather spectacular fibula that Justinian wears in the famous San Vitale mosaic. The characteristic fibula design combined elaborate geometric forms with zoomorphic or animal-based images. Filigree refers to the patterns formed with gold or silver wire. This work used to show up all the time on the AP exam, but even though the purse cover has dropped off the required works list, I could imagine it showing up as part of an attribution question that asks you to identify it as migratory Hiberno-Saxon art. And here are close-ups of the animal figures on the purse cover, as well as some of the vocabulary you need to know to analyze Hiberno-Saxon art. Hiberno means Irish, by the way. Stay tuned. Zoomorphic, again, is just what it sounds like, images in the form of animals. Cloisonné refers to patterns formed by soldering thin metal wire to a metal backing and then filling the spaces with precious stones, glass, or glass paste or enamel fired to look like jewels. You see the same features in our required work, the Merovingian fibulae. The eagle heads and fish on our required work aren't as wonderfully weird as the Sutton Hoo figures, but they are still zoomorphic. We also see cloisonné, which in French means partitioned. In this case, the jewels and enameled glass are separated by thin silver wire. The red zone in the eagle's eye is a garnet. The elaborate knot patterns in the metal are known as interlace. Stay tuned for Celtic illuminated manuscripts. So what might be the religious significance of the eagle and the fish? The fish was a traditional Christian symbol. Christ promised to make his disciples fishers of men. The eagle was the traditional attribute or symbol associated with the Gospel of John. The Frankish king Clovis, a ruler in the Merovingian dynasty, converted to Christianity in 496, as depicted in the ivory on the right. Note that there appears to be an eagle in this work as well. The eagle is, however, a traditional royal as well as a Christian symbol. So there's some debate over whether the Merovingian fibulae are pre-Christian or Christian works. At any rate, the zoomorphic patterns, cloisonné, and interlace were all carryovers from pre-Christian migratory art. As such, they were a valuable tool for Christian missionaries who wanted to present their new message in an artistic form that resonated with their Hiberno-Saxon converts. When the Romans retreated from the British Isles long before they abandoned Gaul or Germany, it was rather ironically Irish and British monks who brought Christianity to the Franks and Saxons, and Irish and British monks who preserved literacy and Latin language and texts, even as literacy was declining drastically in Western Europe. The most characteristic artwork of the Hiberno-Saxons, that is, the Celts and Anglo-Saxons of the British Isles, was the illuminated or illustrated manuscript of text painstakingly copied in a monastery's scriptorium or writing room. Our required work was produced in one of the most famous of these Hiberno-Saxon monasteries, Lindisfarne, on the coast of Northumbria in northern England. The map, by the way, shows the Viking invasions, including the one that destroyed the original monastery in 793. The Lindisfarne Gospels were probably created by an artist monk living in Northumbria in the early 700s, the very heart of what historians call the Dark Ages. Medieval manuscripts were produced by a team of scribes and illustrators whose names, for the most part, are lost to history. The Lindisfarne Gospels, however, are thought to have been created by one man, a monk called Edrith, Bishop of Lindisfarne, between 698 and 721. Interestingly, the College Board does not list him as the artist. I looked this up. Apparently, the attribution to Eadfrith is disputed by some art historians. Anyway, each Gospel opened with a painting of the Gospel's evangelist, followed by an intricately woven cross-carpet page. So, how do we know this is Luke? Well, it's Luke's Gospel that comes after this page, but you should also recognize his attribute, the calf or ox, in this case equipped with rather unrealistic wings. The portrait page isn't required. This portrait page isn't required, but it has some intriguing features. This Matthew is posed as a classical philosopher. The Hiberno-Saxon monks not only brought Christianity to surrounding regions, they also kept at least some classical artistic and scholarly traditions alive. In another shout-out to classical art, we see a few attempts at perspective. Note the shape of the footstool. The drapery, on the other hand, is portrayed without realistic volume. We don't see much evidence that Matthew has a body underneath his stylized cloak. Note that his attribute is a man or an angel. It's a little hard to tell which, since the other attribute animals also tend to sport wings. And here are the attributes of the other evangels: a lion for Mark and an eagle for St. John. I found it intriguing that the animals, as well as the evangelists, are sporting not only wings but halos. Here is our second required image from the Lindisfarne Gospels, the cross-carpet page from the Gospel of Matthew. The cross-carpet page comes directly after the portrait page and serves to separate different books of the Gospel. Again, we see interlace and geometric forms. This is very similar in form, at least, to the cloisonné on the purse cover and the Merovingian fibulae. The zoomed screenshots also reveal zoomorphic forms caught up in the elaborate interlaced knots. Bottom left is another close-up, this time from the Book of John's cross-carpet page. These are known as carpet pages, by the way, because they resemble oriental rugs, and that may have been intentional. Historical sources tell us that prayer mats were known in Northumbria at this time, as well as in other Christian and Islamic lands. Prayer mats, of course, create the proper mood and setting for prayer. They also signify holy ground. Here are two other cross-carpet pages from the Lindisfarne Gospels. Each carpet page contains a different form of the cross, again suggesting that Lindisfarne was a gathering place for Christian scholars from a variety of traditions. Our third required image from the Lindisfarne Gospel is the incipit, or opening page, of St. Luke's Gospel. The incipit page of each Gospel portrays the first letters of the text, elaborated with interlacing and spiral patterns, again, strongly influenced by the migratory art, jewelry, and enamel work we've just seen. The distinctive script takes elements from many different cultures. There are Roman capitals, Greek characters, and the angular letters recalling Germanic runes or symbols. This artist, whoever he was, employed an exceptionally wide range of colors, including using animal, vegetable, and mineral pigments. Okay, now we get to a stretch of our history that the College Board has decided to drop entirely, but I can't bear to, partly because this period is so important to European history. The earlier Merovingian dynasty was replaced by the Carolingians, a noble family that gained great credibility when Charles Martel held back a Muslim invasion of France. The Franks reached their high point under Charlemagne, who was crowned Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope in Rome on Christmas Day 800. Charlemagne's patronage supported a partial recovery of classical style. In the Coronation Gospels, the body returns, as does somewhat realistic drapery. The artist doesn't just use line to create a sense of volume. We see shading, color, and light used to create 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional space. There's even a landscape background and Roman acanthus sleeves. The comparison with this portrait from Pompeii on the right further highlights the similarities. The Ebbo Gospels, on the other hand, represent a very different artistic turn. This used to be a popular College Board image, probably because the frenzied style is so intriguing. Here are a couple more from the Ebbo Gospels. I love these works. St. John with his attribute, the eagle, and St. Mark with his lion. Alas, we need to move on. This is not a required work, but I could imagine you're being asked to explore its resemblance to which required centrally planned church? San Vitale. We know that Charlemagne visited Ravenna 3 times and asked his architects to incorporate mosaics and inlaid stone in his new royal palace. When Charlemagne died, he divided his empire among his 3 sons. Eventually, what would one day be France broke apart into a large number of feudal counties ruled over by lords and other vassals. In the east, a new line of Saxon rulers would reclaim the title Holy Roman Emperor, starting with Otto I in 962. Again, this famous Ottonian church and former AP favorite is no longer required, but I don't want you to think that the more elaborate Romanesque and Gothic cathedrals we're about to study sprang out of nowhere with no antecedents. Here we see the most famous element of St. Michael's Church, its bronze doors. What is remarkable about these doors is that they are cast as a single piece using the lost wax casting method, and this represents a huge recovery of an ancient technology. They were the first decorated bronze doors cast in one piece in all the West since the Roman time. One reason I'm including this, by the way, is sometimes one gets the impression that the Renaissance suddenly recovers classical art and literature and that none of this had occurred in the Middle Ages, and that's simply not true. In the 10th century, groups of Vikings settled down and established strong centralized states in Sicily and in Normandy in the northwest of France. In 1066, William, the Duke of Normandy, invaded and conquered England. Our final required work of the day, the Bayeux Tapestry, offers an extraordinary history of that episode. A continuous narrative in 75 scenes explained with Latin inscriptions and rendered in wool yarn sewn onto linen cloth. In another minute, you're going to see the whole story of the build-up to this invasion, the invasion itself and its aftermath. This tapestry is actually even more important to military and social historians than it is to art historians. Much of what we know about medieval warfare and food preparation comes from this tapestry. So here are just a few screenshots of the tapestry. William the Conqueror's claim to the throne came through King Edward the Confessor. In the top panel, we see the hand of God pointing the way to Westminster Abbey, where Edward was buried. Note also the Latin tituli, or explanations. Here, William's forces crossing the Channel to claim the throne. And here the Norman army is attacking the forces of the King, Harold, the English King, Harold. This image is one of the 2 required works from the Bayeux Tapestry. The main events of the story are contained within the larger middle zone. The upper and lower zones contain images of animals and people, scenes from Aesop's fables, and scenes of farming, husbandry, and hunting. Winners tend to write history. Note that the Norman knights are portrayed as larger, more powerful, and more heroic than the English infantry or foot soldiers. For all its value to historians, this, like Trajan's Column, a somewhat similar work, is still a work of political propaganda. Here's the second required image. We see Bishop Odo blessing a meal. He was a half-brother of William the Conqueror and is thought to have commissioned this work, so no surprise, he gave himself a starring role. As you're reading notes, we pick up a lot of information about life in medieval England from this tapestry, and some pretty graphic images of the carnage involved in medieval warfare. So, let's watch the whole story. I hope you have time to end with a quick comparison of these 2 works. Do you remember the work on top? You're seeing just a detail here. It's the mosaic of Alexander defeating Darius from around 100 BCE. What's the obvious similarity aside from their both being battle scenes, and what are the major differences? These are both propaganda pieces recording the victory of a conqueror and, frankly, glorifying that conqueror. Both are also important historical records of an actual event. But even though it was created more than 1,000 years earlier than the Bayeux Tapestry, the Roman mosaic of a Hellenistic Greek painting is clearly modeled. The bodies have real shape. Alexander's face is also much more expressive. Like most medieval art, the design of the Bayeux Tapestry is highly linear and rather flat. Still, the contorted heads and moving legs do suggest the influence of Roman and Greek battle scenes. So, did you enjoy the break from churches? Don't get too comfortable. It isn't going to